David Volk, voice of the resistance, albeit a strange and silly one. Today's post, another letter from a tired swim parent. This one titled, The Ballad of Eddie Mullins. Dear Ellie, it's funny the things you remember. When swim team members wear bathing caps, it's often hard to tell them apart during a meet. There have been many times over the years when I was cheering on my daughter, loudly yelling her name as she did a flip turn off the wall I was standing near, only to look up and notice she was standing on the opposite side of the pool, looking at me quizzically, wondering who I was yelling at and what the hell was wrong with me. At least when she was in high school gymnastics, I could pick her out of a field of competitors, but with swimming, not so much. So I often just cheer, hope I'm right, and when I find myself cheering the wrong kid, I yell, "Go team!" as if team spirit could make up for my mistake. I mention all this because it reminded me of a story from high school when I was forced to attend a cross-shaped white flight private school in Fort Myers, Florida, my hometown. I didn't go to many of the school's football games, but many of my teachers did. At one particular game, one of the players on our team, the Canterbury Cougars, pulled off an impressive defensive play, and Ellie Bunting, the journalism teacher, and the teachers she was with wanted to know who did it. So they looked in the football program for the team roster. Keep in mind, Canterbury, aka the Canterbury School Corporation, was a small school that probably only had a student body of about maybe 200 kids from pre-K to high school, and the journalism teacher and her friends would have known all 50 or 60 kids in the upper school. Still, all they could see from the sidelines was the player's uniform number. So they looked it up in the roster and discovered it was a guy named Eddie Mullins. So the rest of the game, they yelled, "Go Eddie! Go Eddie!" There's just one problem. There was no one named Eddie Mullins at Canterbury. They had looked up the guy's number in the opposing team's roster. That wasn't the end of the Mullins saga, however. From that day on, he became the school newspaper's equivalent of John Doe. Whenever students laid out the paper and needed a filler name for a caption, they put in Eddie Mullins until they had the student's real name. Over the years, Eddie was quite busy catching passes, making rebounds, and even stealing an occasional base or two. He wasn't the only one who experienced this level of anonymous infamy. A year later, classmate Jean Burkhead, who was born the same day as me and in the same hospital many years before, gave me a copy of a book called A Shadow of a Broken Man by George C. Chesbrough. It was the first in a series of Mungo the Midget mysteries, which I grew to love for its pure weirdness. So, years later, when I was working at the University of Missouri student newspaper, The Man-Eater, and the editors needed the name of an obscure author to put in a news story lead, I suggested Chesbrough. So, for a time, George C. Chesbrough was the Man-Eater's go-to obscure author, often mentioned in leads. I don't know whatever happened to George or Eddie, but for this brief moment, they live on, poolside, somewhere in North Seattle, as I continue to cheer for someone who I hope is my kid, but could well be the son of Chesbrough, Mullins, or even Mongo the Midget. From the edge of sanity at the far end of the pool, I've been David Volk, a voice of the resistance, albeit a strange and wet one.